Welcome to HNB Conversations with Cosmo and Rivka.
Hey everybody, how you doing? Happy Sunday, and we're going to give you our international greeting
Of the week. Okay, so why is that funny?
No, just we're a little stilted right now. You know what I mean?
Stilted?
Yeah, like we're a little
Stiff? Oh, yeah.
That's okay.
Well, it's been a week. Okay, so the word that we're doing, or the people group that we are saying hello from today, is from New Zealand, and they are the Maori Aboriginals of New Zealand.
Right. It's a indigenous
Group.
the
Right. The
indigenous
Maoris
groups
are like the Aboriginal group
in
from New
Australia,
Zealand.
yeah.
Right. But it's a different group, I'm assuming, in Australia.
Yeah.
So these are the Maoris, and you say you say hello like this, kia ora, right?
Mm-hmm.
Kia ora.
Kia ora.
Kia ora, but
Right.
it's different the way I said it. So which is it? Kia ora. Now I'm confused.
No, kia ora.
Kia ora.
There we
Right.
go.
Yeah. It's very pretty, very pretty. New Zealand is, I have a girlfriend that lives there, and it's really stunningly beautiful. You can see it even in Lord of the Rings.
Right.
It's
That's
where
where
Lord of
they
the Rings
recorded
is
Lord of the
filmed.
Rings.
Right. And do you know that its crime rate is super low? Like, it's a really protected, I believe it's an island. It's a really protective island to the point where, so my girlfriend lives there. I have one girlfriend that lives in Australia. Her name's Veronica. And I have another girlfriend that lives in New Zealand. Her name is Debbie, or excuse me, I'm so sorry, Devora. And she was telling me that they're so protective of their small nation there that in order for you to actually live there, you have to be sponsored by someone who's a citizen.
Right, and I'm looking at it because I was pretty sure, and it's made of two islands just
Okay.
off the southeast of Australia.
Okay. So you have to be sponsored by someone that basically vouches for you to be allowed to live there. Like, it's like kind of like when you're getting a job and you have references. It's that kind of thing. It's not like you just apply and then you take classes like our parents had to do to become American citizens. Mm-hmm. In order to become a citizen, you have to be sponsored by someone that you know.
Wow.
Yeah, and so anyways, it's gorgeous, and man, I would love, really, a long-time dream of mine is to go to Australia and New Zealand. I would love to do that. However, I've been seeing some of the insects of these regions. They're quite large.
They are big.
They're so big, and the snakes, and what is it, like all the most dangerous animals in the world or something like live there, not in New Zealand, but like in Australia.
So check this out. So the other day, it must have been just a couple of days ago, Riv showed me this clip.
And I intentionally sent it to you because I know how much you hate snakes.
I hate snakes so much.
You and Indiana Jones.
And it was this clip from Australia, and there was
This family, they're in their backyard grilling.
Right, and there's a python.
Massive.
I mean, it's so big. It's hard to even gather what to gauge how long it was, but it was climbing. Check this out.
It was on the roof of the neighbor's house.
It was on the roof of the neighbor's house, going into this like tree.
So there's two massive pine trees next to the house. Like, think of our neighborhoods, and if you have these long, older or tall, older pine trees. And so this was a massive snake on top of the neighbor's house. And the neighbors are videoing it, and they're just talking. The kids were scared. But you can hear, like, the dad on the side going, is anybody going to have a burger? And they're like, well, we're videoing this. So it's like 6 feet from the house to this one tree, in the top of the tree, not the bottom of the tree. And it goes into the tree, and it's like slithering through the tree, and then goes to go into the next tree.
And for a moment, it looks like it's going to fall when it's between the trees.
And like everyone, including yourself who's watching this, is like, oh my gosh, because
because I'd be afraid if I was on the ground that thing would be anywhere near me.
Yeah, it was so huge.
It was unbelievable.
There's a certain percentage, I don't know what it is, but it's quite large of people who have snakes living in their attics and they don't know it. Like, I guess with us, with like mice or something,
maybe.
That's how it is with.
Well, it made me think of in the Jungle Book when the snake is like, singing his song to put what's the kid's name?
You think it's just a cartoon, Mowgli. You think it's just a cartoon, but
this was a big snake. So see, my fear of snakes is rooted in, I grew up in Florida, And when I was, I mean, before I was 6 years old, but sometime around that time I was 6, I was at my friend's house, which was down the street from ours. And behind their house, they had, his dad was the superintendent of the prison, and they had this body of water, basically a swamp, but they called it the slough, Slough, the slough.
Mm-hmm.
And so there were creatures back there. So one day, he and I are in his backyard running around on the back porch, and he goes, and I see in this bush, it looks like, and I'm just a child, so I don't know any better, it looks like maybe 100 lizards, like running around inside this bush. And
slithering all the way around.
And I was like, look at all those lizards. And he's like, wow, look at those lizards. And so we were running around playing. I think we were playing Ponch and John. We were being chips, you know. and so we come back around, and there is I don't know, a massive. And again, I'm 6, so I don't know how big it was, but it was bigger than me. Water moccasin on the patio, and he goes, all right, because he was from Mississippi. Mm-hmm. He goes, all right, you go that way, and he points to me to go the outside of the house around to the door, and I'll go this way, and that's the shortcut to the front door.
Now, my question is why you couldn't have just both gone the same way.
I don't know. I was clearly a follower at the time, and he was certainly smarter than me. And
yeah, I think even then, with my
he was like,
cynical mind, I'd have been like,
you distract him.
I think I'd have been like, no, I'm following you.
So I was like, okay. So we run, and it was fine. We get to the house, and he goes in and he tells his mama, hey, mama, there's a snake out there. And, and she goes out, and she grabs a pitchfork, and she stabs the thing in the head, and then goes to the bridge over the slough and just throws it back in the water. And as a child,
that was normal to you?
Well, it seemed like it wasn't, nothing about it.
It seemed like, well, the grown-ups do
grown-ups thing. This is the thing that grown-ups do. As an adult, the idea of I'd be calling pest control or animal control.
Yeah. Well, clearly this wasn't her first
rodeo with
a snake,
especially since that thing's in their backyard.
Well, right, and also as a child, we just regardless trust adults. That's how come children don't tell on adults typically, mm-hmm. because that's a grown up, so that the grown ups knows what they're doing, and they must be the ones that are wrong.
Right.
But yeah.
So that's where my fear of snakes originated, and it is strong with me. I do not like snakes, and I don't care. I don't care that black snakes keep away mice and all that kind of. I don't care. I don't want the black snakes. I don't want the mice either. But I don't want any kind of snake around me.
But, I mean, if there are some snakes that kill and eat other snakes, and it's a harmless snake, you're really shooting yourself in the foot.
I'm not talking about snakes. They can they can eat
some
each other.
Some snakes do that.
Yeah, but everyone always tells me, but I don't think that's the issue with black snakes and green snakes. Everybody's like, oh, they're garter snakes. Oh, they're harmless.
But they eat, bugs that we don't want and all of that.
Yeah. And now
I'm more afraid of bugs
mm-hmm.
than I am of snakes.
And now what's happened in Florida is, over the years, people were buying pythons as pets, as sort of exotic pets. And then those pythons become, too big or whatever, and at different points, they just kind of release them into the wild.
Mm-hmm.
And so now you have this foreign species in Florida.
Florida's riddled with foreign species.
But and it's really messing with the
ecosystem.
It does the ecosystem.
That's what I mean, though. There's so many foreign species,
the predators
in Florida, that their whole ecosystem is not doing fabulous.
So that just sounds horrible to me.
Yeah.
Oh, right. Well, that was a. If you, boy, I wish there was a way to show you that video. Or to post it or connect it somewhere.
You
but
can post it.
It's a really interesting video. Anyway, Antonio, you want to spin the wheel?
Yep, here we go. All right. And if you could eradicate one species of insect or animal, which would you choose?
No way.
That is the...
No way.
Oh,
that's funny.
I think we know your answer, Dad.
Yeah, you'd probably get rid of snakes. I mean, that's what I'm picking up.
Yeah, well, let's give it some thought because that's my instinctive answer. if I want to think about, yeah, I mean, the problem is, if you could eradicate, the problem is the whole circle of life thing, right? So if they snakes were extinct, if they were instinct,
I don't
if
think
they were
snakes should be instinct.
extinct.
Instinct.
That's the mistake I
So
just
you
made.
messed me up. That's on
It's
you.
my fault.
That is your fault.
So I'm saying, but we don't want any animal to be extinct because they all serve a purpose.
Right, for sure. I don't think that I think snakes really are valuable when it comes to mice and rats and a lot of
So
stuff
you'd
like that.
rather
And
do
even,
away with rats?
No.
Let's say
do away with
if
rats
you got
or
rid
mice.
let's say if you got rid of this species,
There was no
the
consequence
ecosystem would
to
be
the
fine
environment.
if you could
Okay.
just get rid of a species.
snakes.
That's hard for me because I love animals.
Not
If
not rats.
No, I don't have a problem with rats. I don't care for wild rats because I don't care for coyotes. They scare me. If I were to come up, I'm walking down the road and there's a coyote, it doesn't mean I want to eradicate coyotes.
I mean, the fact is, I would be terrified of most wild animals in
Yes.
the wild.
Sure,
Well,
sure
yeah.
you would. Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah, and I'm more like Elf. You look like you want a hug.
See, so
Like-
she means she's naive.
Yeah, sure. No, I love animals. I think they're all beautiful. It doesn't matter. Like to me, when I see a hurting animal or an animal that's lashing out or whatever,
Yeah.
like I don't. That comes from me. My opinion is like it's been raised improperly. I don't think there are any inherently bad.
I agree.
Animals.
I agree with you in the sense of like when I see an animal like that, yeah, but I have no. I mean, there's no empathy for a snake to me. Like I don't.
Okay, yeah. So
I can't.
But there's a lot of lizards. I mean, they're basically.
No, lizards are different than snakes.
I know they're different. What I'm saying is reptiles in general.
Yeah.
There's a lot of different ones, and reptiles don't actually have
yeah,
feelings.
right,
Like,
'cause they're just like cold-blooded killers.
Yeah.
no, that's not the case.
Well,
No, actually,
the
it-
phrasing "cold-blooded killer" comes from.
okay, but there.
Actually,
That's-
that's exactly the
Okay.
wordplay I was
Okay.
going for.
Well, okay. What I'm saying is, yes, they are cold-blooded. I do understand that, but what I mean is, it's not like the snake's fault that it has gone through that, and I think that they do serve a purpose.
Sure.
And whenever we eradicate anything, there is a
So
There's
A
a
consequence.
rolling
of course,
consequence.
Too.
so what I'm saying is there was no consequence.
Like,
So
he's saying, let's imagine.
let's
that.
imagine you could eliminate it from creation.
because because for instance, I like animals being in their habitat and in their environment.
Yeah.
And actually, I think we should leave them alone there
Yeah.
and leave them alone there.
Except when we have to. The thing is, we have to inhabit environments as well because we're
Yeah.
also animals.
So I'm like, can
So-
we? Yeah.
So, but anyway, Mom, what was like, when I asked the question, the first thing, without even like just on gut instinct, what was the first animal that came to mind? Before you had to be like, well, but this.
Okay,
and
so the
this.
animal that I was terrified of growing up for no real reason, I think, but I mean, I was genuinely afraid of it, probably because of movies I saw when I was little, were sharks.
Sure.
I know a lot of people love sharks, and I'm not saying they're like inherently evil. I don't think that anything's inherently evil, but they are very scary, and I don't know where they are in the ecosystem. I don't know that they're
at the top.
Well, right. I don't know that, but I don't know that they actually eat a specific food. Well, actually, they do. They eat seals and sea lions.
They eat lots of food.
Right, and yeah. But anyway, so I think sharks are something because, especially right now with the oceans warming up, there are more and more sharks attacking humans.
Yeah.
So
Oh, really? I didn't. Like,
Huh?
are the rates going up?
yeah, they have. They have, and in places where they weren't getting shark attacks, they're getting them now because their food sources is changing. Our ecosystem is changing. So those are scary to me, and they're not warm and cuddly. And it doesn't matter who you are. I mean, they attack each other. They're almost like humans.
My understanding with sharks is that sharks eat anything they can.
Right. Yeah.
So, like, if it's bigger than them, they'll avoid that.
Well, they will go after
But
whales.
they'll go after whales, yeah. But like they probably won't eat a turtle.
So if there's a
Yes, they do.
Really?
They eat turtles.
Really?
So-
They'll kill anything. So
Do they avoid jellyfish? Because jellyfish sting.
I
That's
don't
their
know
whole-
that they. I
That's
don't know
their whole thing.
what.
Like jellyfish, like they probably wouldn't eat jellyfish because of.
There's nothing really to eat concerning jellyfish.
Yeah.
It's just jelly with
It's
a nervous
just
system.
a nervous system, yeah.
So okay.
Which is so weird.
Okay, so I don't care for sharks. So I think if I had to pick one thing, I would probably pick sharks. But that's like a really, like the same way when you pick snakes, like you're picking like the entirety of snakes. And there's a lot of breeds there. And that works the same way with sharks. But for me, I would have to pick a shark. And then if I was going to go with an insect, the insect I would go with were mosquitoes. I just don't see that there's any. I feel like mosquitoes are a part of the curse, and flies.
Okay,
mosquitoes and flies.
Okay, so
So your pick is
over
Because
spiders,
it said insect or animals.
which spiders aren't technically insects.
No, I would
they're
not
like-
get rid of spiders, and the reason I wouldn't get rid of spiders is because spiders eat bugs,
But see-
and you can have they're incredibly amazing.
Spiders can have
But
it.
you
I am
have
afraid
me
of-
kill them.
I know I have you kill them, but
You called me over when we were engaged
yes,
to drive across town
yes,
and come kill a spider
yes,
in your room.
yes. I am afraid of spiders, but
You
they
called
have
me
their.
Cosmo.
They are terrifying.
Please,
They look scary.
There's a spider.
They will. They
you-
can bite you.
Yeah, I mean,
You
what
come
what
kill it.
what good do mosquitoes do?
And I
Because
did.
really, as far as I know,
No,
their
nothing.
main thing is they spread disease.
Yeah, they do. They spread disease, and especially they spread malaria
But
and all of that.
perhaps what they do is keep populations
I'm not a
down.
zoologist.
No,
So I don't-
I don't care for mosquitoes
Population
or
control.
flies.
I'll
like
tell
I'd
you-
have to go with. If I wasn't doing mosquitoes, I would go with flies.
I'll tell you this. In the same way, back to the shark thing. If there's a habitat that almost everything in it
Terrifies you.
me, it would be the ocean.
Right.
And the deeper you go, we saw another video the other day of someone feeding their blowfish, right?
Yeah, it was
They
amazing.
And
had a
so
pet
the person blowfish, they had a pet blowfish.
Is this Nemo?
That's not a blowfish, son.
No, it's a pufferfish.
I'm a
I think.
failure.
Okay.
I
so,
failed at homeschool.
So, that Nemo's a clownfish.
No, he's in a fish tank that has a buffer.
Okay, so whatever. This was
Yeah.
and the person dropped in like shells, like crustaceans, and the blowfish just takes or
Shells,
maybe
so like
takes the
serious
shells,
shells.
like hard shells, and just
Like
has
a
these
cracker.
teeth and cracks them
Like
a
with
nutcracker.
no problem
and,
at all.
And you're like, can you imagine? I'm like, don't put your hand in that water. Can you imagine? I mean, that's just horrifying.
Well, first of all, so that's I know that like I showed you that video.
Of course you did.
Yeah.
Because I don't have animal things come.
I
through
have
my-
all animals.
through
Like
my
I love
feed.
animals. Right. So and I think they're funny and
Yeah.
like I watch all the funny cat ones. Like I just love them all. Anyway, but here's the thing though is that they're not predators, blowfish. Like I think typically
They're just eating, right?
right, and that's how they eat. That's their food source. So that's what they're eating. But it's a very cute blowfish, and like when the owner comes around, the fish follows it.
Oh, yeah,
and
no, it's
no,
right.
it's like she's really. I don't know if it's a she or here, but she's really cute.
Sure.
But yeah, everything in the ocean tends to scare you, and for me, like I love the ocean. I love the ocean.
We have only explored 5% of the ocean.
Yeah.
It's like another planet.
Right.
It's more
It's the
than
next. If we're gonna explore anything else other than space, like the oceans are.
But I
something
think
to explore.
space is
You know, when I mean,
less scary to human
when
beings
a
than
couple
the
months
ocean.
ago,
That's true.
Was it right? Yeah, it was a couple months ago because it was around Father's Day when that
The Titanic
the
thing?
Titanic
Uh-huh.
Yeah, the submarine.
submarine imploded. They were showing.
But that guy really cheaped out on the building of his.
Yeah, that's
thing.
not.
Well, we're not getting
That's
on
not
that.
what I'm talking about. They were showing where the different things that are at these depths. You know.
Yeah.
So they're showing, for instance, at a certain depth, like where the depth where that was, how it just the weight of the water completely crushed it.
And somehow
Instantly.
these fish survive.
But there are creatures down there
yeah,
Yeah.
in that kind of water pressure
that are alive.
that are alive and are, I mean, some of them are massive, and they are terrifying looking.
I think there is a reason that the Book of Revelation talks about things coming out of the ocean.
Well, yeah.
I like
Of
beasts
course.
coming out of the ocean.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a reason for that.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. So yeah. So sharks, big fish, generally, I'm opposed to being near. I like them. I leave them where they are, and I don't want them where I am. But like, even beautiful creatures like tigers, right? I mean, just stunning creatures. I don't want anywhere near them.
I think that's wisdom, Cosmo.
When-
I mean, tigers are not intended to be, unless it's the Garden of Eden, we're a food source, honestly. Like, they're definitely dangerous, but that doesn't mean that they're not beautiful
That-
and amazing. Like a
tigers-
grizzly bear.
the-
Don't go up and hug
Yeah.
a grizzly bear, kids.
Dude, tigers are terrifying because their tongues, I believe, are able to like with licking, can like peel skin.
Yeah, of course.
'Cause
Have you
they're
ever
yeah.
seen a cat's
Is
tongue?
that true, or is that?
No.
It's true.
Have you ever seen a cat's tongue?
I'll
Like
look it
it's
up.
all
course.
it's like it's not just like sandpaper, it's like little spines almost. And that's because that's how they clean themselves. But if a cat were to lick you over and over and over again, like it's going to eventually eat through your flesh. And so you have big cats and they have cat
Man.
tongues. They're just bigger. But I think they're majestic
back
animals.
in probably, I don't know, it must have been 2008 or something. We went to see, we lived in Missouri, and we went to see a magic show down in Branson called the Kirby Van Burt Show. And he's not there anymore, but he had these tigers. And so then we got to go backstage afterward
And see the tiger.
and see the tigers. Of course, the tigers, thankfully,
They were behind glass.
they were behind glass. And so they're telling about the different
And they weren't
tigers.
in cages. They had like imagine like a really, really big room. Like they had their own bedrooms, so to speak,
Yeah,
but it was
yeah.
glass
You
enclosed.
could see
and so
like deep plexiglass. Thick
yeah, and so you
plexiglass.
would go through, and
you
there
could
was
see them in their own little habitat and whatever. And so they're telling us about them. And this one over here is named Princess, and Princess is only 2 years old. And Princess is fully grown.
But Princess was beautiful.
Princess, and so Rivka, being the animal lover that she
Right.
is,
Well, we were standing
yeah,
there.
we're right there. She goes up.
Hold
to
up, Princess is is the furthest away from the glass possible.
Yeah.
Like, and it's far. It's not close. Close enough to where, like, if I'm talking like loud like this, like you can hear me. So I walked up to the glass, and there's holes, because they have to breathe
Sure,
and
sure.
all of that. And I just go, she was gorgeous to me, and I just was like, "Hello, Princess." And I think in 2 seconds,
Not-
if 2 seconds,
Not 2 seconds, a split second.
she did not like me saying her name or something. She jumped across with this roar, jumps across and comes and slams herself like she's going to pounce on me up against the glass. And I'm standing there and I'm like, oh my gosh. And
Like-
everybody screamed who
Like,
was there with us.
so listen, I'm saying it's a split second. She's on the other side, and immediately her paws are on the glass as she's standing up. Her mouth is wide open,
Like where my head
like
is.
where her head, like her teeth, like she has killed us.
Yes.
We're dead.
Yeah.
It was. I.
And these are the tigers they used for their show.
It is seared
Right.
in
it-
my mind.
In that moment is why. So when you watch movies and you see these big animals chasing humans and they catch humans and they'll kill humans, whatever. And I always think, why didn't they run? Or why didn't they? Like, there's no time. There's
Yeah.
truly, truly no time. I didn't even think. Like, I didn't get the next thought out of my head. I said, "Hello, Princess." There was not enough time for another thought, another word. And that tiger was like, on
Have you seen
on
that?
me.
There's a video of some guy. I think it was like up in Prescott, and he's just hiking. And,
Oh, yeah.
Mountain
and a
lion.
mountain lion shows
Oh.
up,
He's following him.
and it's following him. So he's having to walk backward. He doesn't
And he's
turn his
videoing
back,
it the whole time.
and he's having to throw little rocks. And I mean, what when you're watching the video is the guy uploaded the video.
Yeah, he
Right,
got
so
on it.
he's
so that's
alive.
the comfort that you have.
But you're still scared
But you're
the whole time
experiencing
you're watching
terrifying.
it.
I just. So yeah, I would do away.
I
with
just want to say,
snakes,
though,
by
I
the
just
way.
want to say, I do not condone.
The eradication of any one species.
Well, that absolutely, but also I don't condone the what's the word to use, like keeping animals in cages like that.
Oh,
I don't think tigers are
captivity.
meant to do that. I don't think it was Princess's fault.
Right.
Or
Oh.
or at any, like, I'm the
It's an
human.
animal.
I took her out of her. Well, we took her out of her environment.
Right.
And those shows now, typically, I mean, especially after what happened in Vegas many years ago now, they don't have the tigers anymore.
Yeah.
They've been. It's.
Yeah,
I think
there's-
it's almost
so, I mean,
illegal in
that's-
most states now.
The zoos are the big zoos that are, like they make large habitats for them.
Yeah.
Many of them are born in that environment, so they're not so.
Yeah.
they're born in
I'm
captivity.
just saying, I'm not, like, when you really, really think about it, I'm
Uh-huh.
just not super comfortable with it. And I'm a meat eater, so I'm not like, a vegetarian where I'm like, I don't believe in, I'm a meat eater. But at the same time, when I think about it, or when I see like animal heads on walls, like, that's hard
it's
for
sad,
me.
yeah.
I don't like that.
So
Anyway.
before we move to the next question, to answer Dad's early question about if it was real about a tiger's tongue, I looked it up.
Oh, okay.
So tigers' tongues, and as well as lions, so really just cats in general, are coated in barbs, which are a mix between a comb and a scraper, and they help to remove feathers and fur from captured prey. And if they licked your hand enough times, it would remove all skin from your hand.
Yeah.
However, if there are cats that are like tigers, when they're friendly with their trainers, can lick their trainers without the intention of that, and so because of the way that they're looking,
Right.
won't take off skin, but they have the ability to take off skin with their
And
just
to
licking.
take off limbs.
Well,
Like,
yes.
I mean.
Well, yeah.
So.
But like imagine.
But I've seen some
yeah.
really beautiful
Oh, yeah.
things between animals and humans. Like, there's that one lion
Mm-hmm.
story where
Yeah, those guys.
they
like,
raised
that
the
lion.
lion from when he
Oh,
was
yeah,
a
that's
cub,
a
because they
sweet one.
saved him.
Yeah.
They saved him, and then they were raising him, and then when he was old enough, they let him go out into the wild. I think it was in South
And then
Africa.
they have the reunion.
And so, like, 20 years later or something,
Yeah,
they
it
go
was-
back
it was
to
like
see
10 years, I think,
or was it
yeah.
10 years? They go back to see if they can find him, and they're being told by, like, they're like, he probably won't remember you or whatever. And not only did he remember them,
Yeah.
but he came running, and he like he changed from being, because he had like pride at that point.
Yeah.
He changed from being this pride, lion or whatever, and then he saw them, and his like countenance, if
turned
lions
into a kitten
change-
again.
he turned into like kind of a cub again, and he
Yeah.
like bounded him and just jumped
Yeah,
on him
it
with
was
his
really
arms
beautiful.
around them, and they're just hugging, and he's so excited, and it was just like, I get emotional when I watch it, because it's just such a beautiful thing.
I get
of it.
emotional, and I know I'm not that brave. All at the same time.
Yeah.
Like we saw one the other day about someone who found a little bitty black panther
Oh.
and
Mm-hmm.
and then raised this black panther to where it's now and cuddling with the black panther
Right, yeah.
and everything and I'm like,
But if you saw the Black Panther as an adult, yes, you would be afraid. You'd be like, that's a really big cat. But if someone gave it to you from when it was a baby and you
Yeah.
raised it, you wouldn't be afraid of it.
Well,
'Cause
I think what Dad's saying is if he found a baby Black Panther, his thought would be, let's get this Black Panther into the hands that can take it. I'm not gonna
that's
raise
Okay.
not me. Yeah.
it. Yeah,
Okay.
he would
That's not-
save it. He would just not raise
There
it.
comes
right.
a point at which that certain animals, though domesticated,
They're animals.
are still super dangerous and deadly, and I just So that's me.
Okay.
I'm not.
Let's
so
move to the next question.
let's move to the next question
All
for
right.
Daddy and I to answer. Or, excuse me, Cosmo and I to answer.
Okay, it's spinning. All right.
It's so funny that
Huh.
it's so funny that we were talking about snakes and then got that question.
I know.
That's so weird.
I know.
1 John 2:15-17 says, "We are not to love the world or the things of the world. How can we follow this and similarly be
Similarly,
be in the world but not of the world?"
Well, I mean, every generation has that same dilemma, including the early church. So how did the early church handle it? They were in the world, and they had their communities, and they stayed strong believers, even through persecution. They just didn't engage in the same activities that the world did. Just like when Cosmo's grandfather was a young boy, and this was in the early 20th century, he wasn't allowed to play football because sports were considered a secular thing. So he wasn't allowed to do that. He did, like he snuck
So
it.
that would be the question, right? Too, is if someone says,
I mean, do you become Amish?
but does that yeah? So the question was the interpretation 100 years ago, or how that many 80 years ago in this among those who were Pentecostals or Pentecostal holiness kind of thing, was that to play play cards or to play a football game was to engage in worldly activity. Now, obviously, we don't view that things in that way. We enjoy competition and games and things like that. But there's a generation that would have thought that that's worldly. So
Right, and that wasn't so long ago, because when we were kids, my dad was like, we would play card games like Go Fish and
Right.
stuff like that, and my dad would be like, don't tell anybody we play cards, because people had that kind of like, it was like it. There seems to be like very little rationale. Like at that time, it was like, if you play cards, you're gonna be a gambler. It's
Right.
not like you're just playing
right,
a card game.
So so let's just read the passage itself, right? So it says here, 1 John 2:15 says, "Do not love the world or the things in the world. If anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him." So first of all, obviously, when he's talking about that, he's certainly not talking about loving the world as in loving people or cultures,
Right.
Because for God so loved the world.
Right.
So the idea is the way of the world to if you continue in the passage, he says, for everything in the world. Now he clarifies, he says, the desire or the lust of the flesh, the desire of the eyes, and the boasting of life is not from the Father, but from the world. So the issue has to do with this drive that characterizes you, right? The desire, the lust of the flesh, that you're pursuing everything from from a selfish point of view, from your cravings and even the desire of the eyes, the boasting of the life. You think back to the garden, right? I mean, when Satan tempted Eve to eat from the tree,
Right.
it says that she saw that the tree was good for food. So you have the desire of the flesh, that it was the thing of lust for the eyes, desirable to the eyes, and the tree was desirable for imparting wisdom. So that's kind of like the pride of life or the boasting of life. So she took its fruit and she ate it. And so first of all, to kind of narrow down to what it is to love the world really has to do with, I believe, walking with the same mindset of the world, with a worldly mindset, with the same
Right,
pursuit.
because I don't think until Eve actually ate the fruit, I don't think that how she felt was somehow sinful. I think we all
Fair.
struggle with whether, because we're born into sin and we have a flesh, right? And so we can be jealous, or we can want more money, or we can want, these are natural things to want or do, but it's your actions that are the issue. So for her, she took the apple and she ate it, and then she was guilty of sinning, because that's specifically what God told her not to do. Just like you can be angry, there's nothing wrong with being angry, but you're supposed to be angry and not sin.
Right.
So your actions speak louder than how you feel. Just like, we always come back to this, just like you can tell somebody you love them, but it doesn't matter how much you tell somebody you love them. It matters what you actually do.
Right. Reread the question to us, Antonio. I want to hear it in its totality again.
All right. Sorry. Let me pull it back up.
He just
1 John 2:15 through 17 says, "We are not to love the world or the things of the world. How can we follow this and similarly be in the world but not of the world?"
So how do we not? So what is it that we have to do to not assimilate into the world, but not control the world? Because the world is the world. It is sinful. It is dark. It is the world. And they're entitled to be the world because they don't have what we have. And we're supposed to be different.
Right.
So what is it we're supposed to do that's different? Honestly, for me, and I know a lot of people get frustrated with this answer, but I think how we dress has a lot to do with our assimilating with society. And it doesn't matter when we've lived, when you're compromising yourself. I mean, and we kind of just keep going in that direction as a culture anyway, but when you are wanting to so fit in culturally with, like when we were young adults or middle-aged, when we were in our 20s and stuff, and you have those really low rider jeans, and you have girls that honestly should not be wearing these jeans because it's just not attractive on them, but it's what's in style. And so everybody's like wanting to buy these jeans, but these are really like inappropriate jeans. Now, you have a whole section of people and women and everything that'll be like, it's just jeans, it's just fashion, who cares? Okay, but from a standpoint of assimilation, your pants are meant to be pants, and they can be cute and everything like that without you looking like, as a woman anyway, that you're losing your pants.
Yeah, I think, and I don't disagree with the idea that we need to walk in appropriate modesty. I do think that
I'm not saying we should be wearing turban
I do think that sometimes what can happen is, people will reduce the command to those kinds of things, because I'm not disagreeing with you.
I understand.
But where there was a time where there's a group that would say that by you wearing makeup and jewelry,
Sure,
that kind of thing. And so, it's actually like recently we've been going through in Manna, going through Philippians, and there's this part when I was going through it in Greek, that it says in Philippians 1:27, it says, only live your lives in a manner worthy of the good news of the Messiah. And that word where it says live your lives, it uses this unique word that it's actually, and I'm not making it about this, but it's actually the word from which we get our word for politics. Mm-hmm. It's about your citizenship. Live out your citizenship, the place where you're a citizen, in a manner worthy of the gospel. And then he goes on the next passage, right? And he defines this, he defines it clearly, in a more clear way, by talking about the mind of Messiah, the way of Messiah, which is do nothing out of selfishness or in pursuit of empty glory, but with humility consider others above yourselves, looking out not only for your own interest, but also for the interest of others. Have this attitude in yourselves, which is in Messiah Yeshua. Then it goes on to say, do everything without grumbling or arguing, so you might be blameless and innocent, children of God in the midst of a crooked and twisted generation. Among them you shine as lights in the world. And that's chapter 2:15. So what you get is this picture of being in the world. But when we say we're not of the world, it's some of the outward stuff is when we talk about even the reasoning for why we dress modestly and that kind of thing is because we don't want to point people toward to tempt people toward physical lust and that kind of thing. But what drives us is the mind of Messiah. That it's supposed to be kind of a you before me attitude rather than me first. Mm-hmm. And if we demonstrate that in that kind of kingdom of God attitude,
it's a really hard question, in my opinion, because I've raised 5 kids. My youngest is 12 now, and boys, it's much easier to keep modest, But when you have girls, and then they see other girls dressing in really cute shirts, half shirts, or whatever. Now, when I was in my early 20s, I did too. It was the 90s. It was in. I did too. So I'm not trying to be like judgmental.
Right. And I was actually, when we got together, and I was like, and I didn't like you wearing those kind of shirts.
Right. Yeah. And so as females or as women, so as women, we're like, a lot of us will feel like you can't tell us how to dress, because the first thing that usually happens is it's not that everyone across the board is going, how can we make this a balanced and equal playing field? For the most part, it's how can we stop women from dressing this way. So for women, it's a really sensitive subject because we do not want to be told how we should dress or what we should not wear or whatever. And women do like fashion and women do like makeup. So I think for me, it comes down to, and everyone starts to then say, well, I prayed about it and I feel like the Lord told me I can. And everybody starts giving different answers and it gets really complicated because, people can cherry pick scripture and go, well, this is why it's okay for me to do this and this is why it's okay for me to do that. Mm-hmm. But ultimately, it's about just not I don't know how to put it. It's about not being a part of visually. That doesn't mean that we have to wear burqas, but it does mean that there should be some boundaries there that we're not willing to cross as believers because we do want to be different. There's a reason that society does what it does. It can do whatever it wants to do because there are no boundaries. Like we have boundaries as believers. Right. We have a boundary system that we're supposed to adhere to. The world can do whatever the world wants, and it is very tempting.
Right, but I agree with you. I guess what I would say is that some of these specific things are symptoms of a deeper issue of what worldliness is, because you can see a room full of people dressed in their long dresses.
Right. I wasn't finished actually. Yeah. What I was going to say. Okay. I was just trying to talk, and I think you always have really great things to say. Yeah, but so I was going to go in that direction. Mm-hmm. Because ultimately, so I have daughters, and I couldn't find anything when they were little that the shorts weren't too short or things weren't too revealing or too tight. But then it made no sense to me. Like, we have conflicting things where we're like, you can't see me in my underwear. Like, we're going to be conservative as far as that goes. But yet then we wear bathing suits and we wear bikinis, and there's no problem with that. Everybody's on the beach wearing that. A girl's going to walk around in her bikini. Nobody's going to blink an eye. She should be allowed to wear it, whatever. But then you're not going to see someone see you in your underwear. So why is it not okay for me? This is how my brain works. Why is it not okay to be seen in your underwear if it's okay to be seen in a bikini? Typically, bikinis are less modest than most underwear. Is it a fabric difference? Like, our mindsets are in, like, we view things in different ways. And then it goes down to, it has to be a heart thing, and the heart thing has to then project that. Because you can have people with long skirts and long hair and super conservative where they're the worst, because then it's religion. And it's not actually an act of the heart. It's not out of submission and obedience and a place of just who am I before God. So I wouldn't even, as a woman, even with my daughters, I would say this. And because we all have a personal relationship with the Lord, mm-hmm. it does have to come down to, what do you feel like the Bible says, and what do you feel like the Lord is speaking to you? It has to, in my opinion, it has to be the same. Like, you can't just say, well, since I like this, I rationalize that I think God's okay with this. But it does reveal the place of your heart. Because I have a great deal of respect for, like, Muslims, where women are proud to cover their heads. They're proud to do that, where only, and in Judaism as well, they'll do that. And I know that at least in the Muslim girls that I knew or know or what I have watched, is that this is a source of pride. This is a source of, this is who I am. And it is a self-respect thing for them. Mm-hmm. They see it as a self-respect thing between me and my husband and my family. Because when they're with their families, they take those off. Right. It's just when they go out in public. And so we can see that, though, and we can say that that's suppression. But I don't think they feel suppressed, because this is their act before their faith that they're doing, and they're proud of that. Yeah, well,
I think that would vary from person to person.
Yes, of course.
But I think
just like everything varies for us as well.
Sure, I think someone could make the case that religion that actually ends up looking to control is also worldly.
Sure.
and it demonstrates a worldly mindset and a worldly attitude. And so sometimes what we want to do is reduce what worldliness is to these outward expressions, and it really is, the outward expression is expressing something about the condition
Right.
of the heart.
And I will also say that most of the time we want to wear those fashions is because we actually do want to assimilate. We don't want to be different. We do want to look like everybody else.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to feel different.
Right.
And maybe we should be different and feel different.
You know, as a sports fan, it's interesting to me. There are, I love watching sports. But what I do also see is that I do see people that lift up these athletes to a place of idolatry. And you have to watch that. Look, even in our world of celebrity culture, and you can see that celebrityness show up in the Christian world, right?
All the time.
We went to I took the youth years ago. This was probably, I don't know, anyway, probably about 2017. Took them to this. There was a concert here in town, and it had all of these different artists and bands. We went to GCU, and so there was one point. I remember this guy comes out, and he's running through the crowd, and everyone's excited to be just touching his hand, you know. And and the girls are screaming, and this is a Christian concert, right? And everything in me was like, my spirit was really grieved by what I was experiencing there. What I loved at that moment was our youth were just sort of like looking and going, what is like, they didn't participate in that kind of thing. I remember actually at that same concert, Ren Collective was one of the groups that came out, and I remember when they came out and they began to lead in worship, the whole spirit of there was a difference in the room. So you can have things being done in the name of Jesus, but they're being done in a worldly way.
Sure.
And because it comes down to not just what's outwardly visible, but what the inward reality is.
Right.
And so often our talks about, because I like what you're saying is what a lot of people do is they'll go, okay, let me. So a lot of times we've reduced what holiness is to, or what it is to be worldly or not worldly, to these outward visual measures that are easily noticeable, right? But then the opposite of that is where we go, hey, that's too shallow. We need to go deeper. So then on the other side of that is that you'll have people throw off all restraint and be like, look, the Lord sees my heart, and I can walk around scantily clad, but that's also not showing love for your neighbor. That's not showing love for a world in which you don't want. Your goal is not to make men or women look at you to desire you, but that when they encounter you, that they will see that your character would point them to the
Right.
Lord. You know, that's
And there are some things, though, that we don't notice, though, till we're older as well. Like when I wasn't too old of an adult. I was still in my early 20s. When you're young, you go to concerts and stuff like that. And in my early 20s, I was at a concert, and I'm looking around. I think it was a secular concert. Of course, it was a secular concert. Because the reason I thought of this whole thing was because it was a secular concert. But I was looking around, and everything that everyone is doing is exactly what we do in worship. So whether they're raising their hands, they were crying, it is a form of worship. So for me, I wasn't actually comfortable. Like, it's not the music that I had an issue with. It was what was taking place at that time. There's tons of people that be like, oh, it's not a big deal. Don't worry about that. But actually, what we do is important. Your heart in that moment, like, are you feeling that way when you are thinking about the Lord, or when you're thinking about those other things? But some of that just comes with maturity. When I was younger, look, I never, ever, ever had an issue with wearing a bikini. Not ever. Until I was married. And right after our honeymoon, we went to go visit your family in Florida, and I put my bikini on to go out to the beach, And all of a sudden, I'm acutely aware that I am practically naked. And there are going to be people out there that see as much as me as almost as much as my husband sees. And for me, I felt the need to somewhat cover up because that felt private to me. My body and who I was belonged to me and my husband, and I didn't want to share that with everybody else. But that didn't occur to me until after I was married. So, I think it has to come from a place of personal conviction. It comes from a place of spiritual maturity, and then just regular maturity. We can't force things on individuals because God is not a God of control. It's self-control, not the control of others. But the conversation, I think we can all have the conversation about, okay, so we need to look at ourselves and say, Lord, what am I doing that is about me and not about you? Right. Because if it's not about the Lord, then why is it not about the Lord? Why am I not considering the Lord? Why am I not going, is this something that I would feel totally comfortable wearing in front of Jesus? Right. And it's easy for, I can hear it in my head, kids in my head. It's really easy to be like, yeah, I'd be perfectly comfortable if Jesus was here seeing me dressed like this. You've never even seen Jesus. Like, really, none of us have seen him. He is so holy that you can't know exactly how you would respond other than he is so holy that the smallest of sin inside your heart, you would recognize and notice.
Right. It's like when Isaiah saw the Lord, and as soon as he saw the Lord, and he's in holy, 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 and he looked at himself basically and said, "Woe to me! I'm a man of unclean lips." And
right.
People,
exactly.
He became acutely aware.
Your sin
of
becomes
his
so obvious in that moment. So it's easy to say that. It's easy to blow those things off. And as we get older, our children get older, I hope that they will, like when we were younger, whether today's generation realizes it or not, all our friends started getting tattooed when we were younger. And I'm not here to judge tattoos, but I just like when we look at scripture and we look at the spiritual reasonings for scripture and we look at why, I know we can't obey all the laws in the Old Testament, but when we look at why it's not to do what you're not to do, what it says in the Old Testament, and we have to think through why we're doing what we're doing. I don't think anything that we're doing is like insignificant. We're created in the image of God. When we speak, our words have power, whether it's positive or negative. How we dress affects individuals or projects something. And it doesn't always have to project. Like when I say project something, I don't mean it has to project like oh, look at her, she's inappropriate. I mean, you can be stunningly beautiful and carry yourself in a way that is beautiful, and it can be something that's glorifying to the Lord.
Yeah. I think for me, with all of it,
or you can be totally conservative and you can be completely covered up in clothes, and everything you're wearing is not glorifying to the Lord. Mm-hmm. So it has to be like, where are you at, and what do you believe the Lord would want of you? What
drives you?
Yeah.
What's your why? What's your motivation? That's the sneaky thing behind it all that we have to really lay before the Lord. When we are reactionary and go, no, I can do this. The question is, okay, Paul says, yeah, everything's permissible, but not everything's beneficial in 1 Corinthians 6. And then I can do this. What? So why am I reacting this way? Am I willing to lay this before the Lord? Again, so what's the motivation? The issue, I think, in terms of loving the world and loving the way of the world, what's driving me? Am I driven to get control? Am I driven to get power? Am I driven to get my way? Is that what's actually motivating me, driving me? Or am I motivated by love of others, by love of God and love of neighbor? Is that what's driving me? And those are questions that we keep having to let the voice of the Lord, let the Spirit of the Lord keep speaking to us, so that to go from layer to layer. It says in Jeremiah 17, it says the heart is deceitful above all things. Who can know it? And the next verse says, I, the Lord, search the heart. I, the Lord, I search the
And it says
the
the
mind.
man does not know the depravity of his own heart.
Right. So that's where we have to say, what's my why behind it, and that because it's the motives that where you really find the worldliness, as it were, the me firstness, as it were. And so that's people want to sometimes reduce it to a checklist of things that's just the starting point. Those are all valid. Those can be valid checklists, but there can be, look, there can be plenty of people who don't do these checklist of things, right? So some people will define that they're good holy Christians because they don't ever have a drink, and there are plenty of people who love the Lord and have a glass of wine or have a drink, and yet they've reduced what worldliness is to what goes in. But Scripture says it's not what goes into a man that makes him unclean, it's what comes out of a man, is what Jesus says, that makes him unclean. So the question is, what's in you? What's inside of you? What's your heart? And what do you love? What do you pursue? And if you're loving and craving the lust of the eyes, the pride of life, the lust
And that
of the
can
flesh,
come in any area.
all kinds of areas.
It doesn't, we want to think of the world as the world, like over there, but it's here. It's right here, right now, in my heart, inside of me, from whether it's the TV shows that I'm watching, Antonio, the TV shows that I'm watching, or nothing. It's that whether it's the TV shows that I'm watching, are they edifying to the Lord? Like, you have to look at yourself, or even if it's okay, so this is going to sound silly, but in my home, I have felt, and I don't have a ton of I'm certainly always behind when it comes to decor, okay? But am I consistently wanting to update my home repeatedly and spend the money to update my home repeatedly because it's something that I need? Or is this something that I'm in competition with everything that I'm seeing out there in other people's homes and the magazines and the TV shows and everything, to where I am wasting my thought process and my time and my finances and everything like that on my home being updated?
Right, what's
and my
your
home,
why?
What's my why? Right.
Yeah,
and so
that's
it
fair.
can be,
That's good.
it can be on any level with anything. And balance is important, because you can have the Amish, who I wanted to be Amish when I was a kid. Like, that was me. I was like, when I grow up, I'm going to go live with the Amish. It looked like the perfect life to me. That's just the way I am. But within that society, regardless that they have no electricity for the most part, that they dress incredibly conservatively, they don't even wear buttons so that they are not being boastful with their dress. The men don't have mustaches because it made them apart from the world, because you have men that have beards and mustaches, so they shave their mustaches to make themselves look like that so that they would be distinctively looking different. However, within the Amish communities, you have just as much sin, sexual abuse, infidelity, all of this,
right? Because it's
corruption.
Because worldliness is
It's
heart
about the heart,
condition.
right?
That's because all that other stuff, while there can be validity to it in its proper place, it's a symptom of the sickness. But the sickness is what you have to deal with. If you keep dealing with the symptoms, if we deal with I don't this, I don't that, I don't this, and we don't deal with why don't I this, why do I this, if I don't deal with my heart condition, then what you end up is with a people that can find a way to check off a list that says, I'm good with God, and yet I can get my way, and I can manipulate, and I can twist, and I can take, and I can crush in order to get my way, all under the guise of I'm doing something righteous and holy.
Right. All too often, I see people, especially with the movement that we're in, and the ministry movement that we're in.
You mean within Messianic?
The Messianic movement. Okay. And I'm sure it's this way with everybody, but in my
just the tendency toward religion.
right? In my experience, I can see people that have a list that they check off. Well, I do this and I do this and I do this and I don't celebrate this and I don't do this and I don't do these things. And they have that list that they check off. But these same individuals are horrible to other people.
Right.
These same individuals are just disregarding of people's pain or disregarding of anyone else. And there's a rationalization that they put in that they'll rationalize it. Well, this is why it's okay. And well, this is why it's not okay, or for whatever. But it is about who we are inside. So
And
it doesn't.
And my question would be is if Jesus were dressed up as you, if he were dressed in your skin and he encountered those different ones in the world, what would they encounter in him? And I don't think that they would run into him being like, well, I just that actually the times where he expresses a level of harshness is only with those
The
who are
religious
clad
elite.
that outwardly
Looked perfect.
the outside of the dish, outside of the cup is clean, but inside there's dead
Right.
men's bone. You know, those are the ones that he came at and said, this is baloney.
Some of the people that I am the most jealous of, in a good way, okay? They've not, in my experience in my life, they've not been the most wealthy. They've not been the most beautiful. They've not been with the most beautiful homes or whatever. For me, I can sit down with someone that I've met and they can smell, you know?
Mm-hmm.
But yet, I see Jesus in their eyes.
Yeah.
I feel Jesus when they talk. And that's what draws me. And so if we're supposed to be provoking a world to jealousy to want to be like us, that doesn't mean we assimilate into the world. That's not what that, you know, we have been on this slippery slope forever. You know, whether it's our music and I'm not coming against our music. I'm not coming against how we decorate our homes. I'm not coming against all of those things. What I'm saying is that we've been assimilating for such a long time, we don't even realize how we're assimilating. And we can say it's with the purpose of drawing the world into our churches and drawing the world. Yes, come in here. Like, see how much we're like you? This is now how I can minister to you. Yet that's the opposite of what the Lord wants us to do, because it's not supposed to be about us. Mm-hmm. It's supposed to be about the Lord in us, the Holy Spirit in us.
Right.
So it doesn't, all of those things should not be our why, or like, what is it? The ends don't justify the means.
Right.
You need to be in a place where your heart and who you are inside is so filled with who God is, that it doesn't matter if you're the lowliest, it doesn't matter if you're homeless. If a wealthy person came by and looked at you, they could see and feel and know there is something about this person that is drawing me to them. I want what they have.
Right.
You know?
There's this passage here in 1 Peter chapter 3, and it kind of closes, and when we read it in the Tree of Life version, it says finally, but the word in Greek it says todetelos. It says for the goal. Now the goal. Here's the goal. Here's the purpose. Here's all together. This is what you're after. It says finally, all of you. It says be harmonious, which is be of one mind, is what it says. Be unified in mind. Be sympathetic, like tendered. Be brotherly, and it uses Philadelphia, loving brothers. Excuse me. It says be tender-hearted. Be humble-minded. Do not repay evil for evil or insult for insult, but give a blessing instead. It is for this reason you were called, so that you might inherit a blessing. For the one who loves life, wanting to see good days, must keep his tongue from evil and his lips from speaking deceit. He must turn away from evil and do good. He must seek shalom and pursue it. For the eyes of Adonai are on the righteous, and his ears are open to their prayer. But the face of Adonai is against those who do evil. He's quoting from Psalm 34 there at the end. But the goal is, it comes down to what, here he's gone through, at this point, I mean, 1 Peter's so rich, but he says it's to this that you were called. It's for this reason. And he says things like, don't return insult for insult. Instead, return with a blessing. Like, he's coming back to a heart condition. He's coming back to saying what he's describing here is be like Yeshua. And that's really when we talk about
We're projecting the fruit of the Spirit.
worldliness is more about is about what the works of the flesh are in Galatians chapter 5. Don't be full of hostility and rage. Don't be, all of these where you're pursuing yourself. But this is what and then the fruit of the Spirit is what we're supposed to be demonstrating.
Right.
And so if our why and our motivation is coming from the right place, and we're really in pursuit of, Lord, what is it you desire of me? Then we're going to be concerned with causing others to stumble. We're going to be concerned with how our witness affects other people, and all of these. We're gonna the overflow of that will be a life that is pleasing to the Lord.
I mean, something as small as this. When you're driving your car and someone cuts you off, and being okay with it.
Right.
And not being like honking your horn or yelling at them in the middle of the car. I mean, this is where we are supposed to be different. This is why I can't tell you how many times I hear people rationalize when I'm like, but this is what the Bible says, and this is who we're supposed to be, and we're supposed to be kind and gentle and honestly battling spiritually, not physically,
Right.
all of these things. I hear so many rationalizations as to why. Well, I know it says that, but I know or we take our personal cultural perspective and we try to apply it to an ancient people group to rationalize our behavior today. Mm-hmm. But it's about just who you are. And I think a lot of us think that we're doing well and we're not. I think we look around and we think because it looks like blessing that we're doing okay with the Lord, and we're not. I think that this is why the scripture says that there will be so many that on judgment day say, but Lord, Lord, but I did this and this and this and this in your name. And he'll say, I didn't even know you. Mm-hmm. Leave. I'm sorry, but I didn't even know you. Yeah. Because it's about our heart. Even, and I say this all the time, my friends know I say this, my children know I say this, even Satan believes in Jesus. But who is he and what's his why?
Right.
What is he doing? How is he so we're supposed to be different in that way. So you have martyrs, right? I was telling my parents a story of this martyr story of these Chinese martyrs, and they had been caught and they were going to be shot and killed. And the son that was with them, he took off and went and took off into the forest because of course he was afraid. And he took off in the forest and he was hiding. And his father went and called him out and said, come, it's okay, come. And they were all then shot and killed. And I was telling this story, and the question is first of all, why did the dad go get the son? Come on, would you go get your kid and be like, yeah, I'm walking you to your death kind of a thing. Our instinct is to self-protect. Our instinct is to go run, right? Our instinct is to fight. Our instincts are to defend ourselves. But the greatest testimony ever is being willing to lay down your life. We saw Jesus lay down his life. So imagine they're shot. The greatest testimony was them standing there, knowing without a shadow of a doubt where they were going, knowing that their lives are so much bigger than what this is. And then in being martyred, the testimony that left, even for the gunman. Mm-hmm. That's how come when we have martyrs around the world who, they see themselves as martyrs, but we'll call them when we call them terrorists, but their impact on their cultures are huge, because to lay your life down for something, it's the opposite of fighting. I mean, I'm not talking about laying it down in a violent way. Right. I'm talking about where we have these volumes of the books of martyrs where people were martyred for their faith. Right. It is a standing for your faith that is so powerful that you can't compete with, because our instincts are to self-preserve. Our instincts aren't to love our neighbors. Our instincts are to love ourselves. Our instincts aren't to be gentle. Our instincts are to
Well,
retaliate. Our
or to
instincts,
be gentle until it costs us.
right? Our instincts
To
aren't to
to
be
love you until it costs
right.
me. Then
We may not have self-control, but we're all about wanting to control everybody else.
right.
So to be different, in my opinion, like to answer the question, to be in the world but not of the world, is we live here. So yeah, we're gonna, like you and I, like we live, our house is
Yeah, and
big and everything.
I mean, look, you tell that story, and I sit here, and
Right.
in all honesty,
Right.
I don't know. I don't think
No,
I
the
would.
first
I would.
time
I don't think I would go
I
get
was in a
Rafi.
mission
I'd
service.
be like, run, Rafi,
Right.
run.
I was in a mission service when I heard the story, okay? And these missionaries to China were telling the story. And we were there as missionaries.
Yeah.
And we're sitting there, and I have three. I had three little kids at the time. And I began weeping. I mean, I cannot contain myself because I know I don't think I could do that. And I was like, God, please don't ask that of me. Please don't. And so I'm weeping because I also feel guilty because here I am, I'm a missionary. I'm supposed to be reaching people for the gospel and standing up saying all these things, but I don't know if I could do that. And if I'm not in a place that I could do that, then I need to look at me and I need to go, Lord, no, like check me. Where do I need to grow? What do I need to be willing to lay down in order to serve you? Because my instincts, I was much younger then, and I'm still who I am today. My instincts are my fleshly instinct, but we're supposed to be the opposite of those things. So if we behaved in all the opposite ways of our flesh, which is the fruit of the Spirit and those attributes of God, that would be us absolutely not assimilating into the world.
Right. I mean, I think the most unworldly thing to do is love your enemies.
Yeah.
To pray for those who persecute you. The most natural thing to do
Go after
is
them.
to hate your enemies, is to hit back, is to strike back, is to have anger and retaliation in your heart. It's the most natural thing, which is why when we even read where Jesus says to turn the other cheek, it's one of the first verses that we want to go. But I mean, it doesn't say turn it twice. Like we immediately
Rationalize.
how can we get around this?
Yeah.
How can we follow this in a legalistic way rather than following the heart of it? And this is where it's like I pray that the Lord continues to shape me into his likeness where I don't want to turn where I turn the other cheek because I don't want to strike back, because I don't have retaliation in my heart. Because the greatest demonstration of an unworldliness would be to do what Jesus did, to be willing. Here you described in a very tangible way of laying down your life, but it's not even always just being a martyr in that way of laying down your life. But in our society, we're not called to die in a physical way to stand for our faith. Or we're not required to at this stage, but
we would for our country.
Right, but
I'm just
but
saying,
we
like
are
across
to,
the world,
we
like
are,
we
but
think
we
in those
have to be
terms.
willing to die to my rights, to myself. Am I willing to love my neighbor enough to lay down my rights,
Right.
for them? Or am I going to go, that's too far, my rights, me?
Or, like so many of us do, are we going to just try and find all the scriptures in the Bible that will justify our not needing to?
Right. I mean, here, you've heard it was said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. I tell you, don't resist an evildoer, but whoever slaps you on your right cheek, turn to him the other also. And then wanting to sue you and take your shirt, let him also have your coat. Well, these are tough. This is an unnatural.
But can you imagine
if
a believing community, as a believing community, if we actually began to walk this out?
Well, look at this next.
How many people would say, I want what they've got? Because if they have that kind of peace, if they have that kind of faith, if they have something I don't have, and it's real. I mean, when you have gurus that will sit and they develop these big followings because it's all about people are craving inner peace.
Mm-hmm.
People are craving, the whole dying to self thing. Like if you were to go to India, how many people travel to India and they go to these places where it's all about basically, stripping yourself bare in every way to get to your peaceful center or whatever. And they're doing that because there is something inside of us that wants what the Spirit has to offer. But we have to be willing, the way the Lord was, to lay his life down, to lay ourselves down.
Listen to this next verse. We kind of zoom past it, but whoever forces you to go 1 mile, go with him too. So in those days, in those days, what would happen was the soldiers, Roman soldiers, would, they would abuse their authority, and they would say to someone, say to a Jewish person in Judah, here, I want you to carry this, carry my pack, carry this, carry my weight for a mile, and they force you to under threat. And so now you could either do it with resentment and anger in your heart because of how this person is abusing their authority over you, or you could see them through a different perspective and lay down your life in this regard. And he says, whoever forces you to go 1 mile, go with him too. Like, don't let the way of the world win by defeating you in terms of your attitude, your heart, your spirit, where it makes you like the world. But rather, you become someone who says, you know what, yeah, is this too... I'm like genuinely, not passive aggressively, not nastily, says, you know what?
Well,
maybe I can bless this person by carrying this 2 miles for them. Even though they don't appreciate it, I'll do it with a willing heart.
I think, though, the only way we're able to do that, though, because our flesh is really, really strong, the nature of who we are, our instincts are instincts.
Right.
They come and we respond in a way that we do because that's the way we naturally are. When our kids were young, and even they're young for me, but some of them are adults and some of them are older teenagers and everything. I say to them, I'll have these conversations like, okay, so what would Yeshua do in this situation? And then are you projecting the fruit of the Spirit, or are you projecting is your flesh what's in charge of you? Mm-hmm. And they'll say, oh yeah, I know, and we'll go over that. But what I have to remind them is, and I've said this to all of them, is that it is nearly impossible to operate against our flesh unless we have the power of the Holy Spirit working within us. Right. That's why it is supernatural. It is natural when we see children fighting and rolling around or yelling at each other or calling each other names or doing all these things. That's the natural way of it. That's just who we are as people. And we will stay that way unless there is that. What you talk about often is the transformation, but that's the Holy Spirit in us. And so when my children act that way, I will say, you need to go and you need to take time with the Lord, and you need to feed your spirit supernatural food. Yeah. So you need to be in the Word, you need to be praying, you need to spend time with the Lord, because without that, it's nearly impossible. Even if you're legalistically doing it, you're not naturally feeling like, just like forgiveness. It is so hard to forgive people, but when you're choosing to forgive someone and not retaliate and walk in peace, and you put yourself before the Lord, and even if you're like, Lord, please forgive me, or please help me forgive this person, eventually you feel true forgiveness. No matter what took place, you feel true forgiveness, not because of anything you did, but because of what the Holy Spirit's doing in you. Yeah. And so we cannot behave that way unless we are truly, truly walking with the Lord. And so you'll know them by their love.
Right.
You'll know them by how they behave. You'll also know who they don't serve, regardless of what they say, by how they behave.
Let me wrap it up this way, because we've been probably going for a while. Mm-hmm.
It was all that animal talk.
We opened up talking about snakes. Uh-huh. And you think about the fact that the snake, I hate snakes, but snakes are not who they were intended to be.
Right.
Snakes have been made into something deadly and terrifying and slithery, that they had legs. They weren't just crawling on their bellies.
Maybe they were a regular lizard.
And the enemy had an impact on the snake that changed the course of that snake, and we want it gone. And in the same way, our nature has been transformed in a way that reflects the enemy rather than the heart of God. And so what we want is to walk in his ways, to love our neighbor as ourselves, to love selflessly, and to return to be transformed back into the nature that he originally intended for us, that the snake inside us will be gone, right? And so that's, I think
we're a walk in progress.
I'm not who I was. I'm not who I'll be.
We're a work in progress. None of us have hit that mark.
I think a walk in progress is a fine way to say it too, because it is a walk, and we're walking by the power of his Spirit, walking with him from who we were to who will be, and so that's, Lord, we just ask you as we finish this podcast today, Lord, to continue to give us ears to hear your voice and a heart to do your will, Lord, and that we would have the mind of Messiah, that you would transform us by the renewing of our mind, that we would think like you think, that you would transform our nature day by day, moment by moment, so that what comes forth from us is not what we see in the world, but something that we see only in you, and that people would see you in us and experience you in us. We love you and praise you in Yeshua's name. All right. Well, hey, may the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious unto you. May the Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. Shalom, shalom. Have a beautiful day.